1988 and as governor from 1988 to 1992, the 52nd Louisiana governor, and he was a frequent guest here at the Press Club. So we will miss him, and we wish his family and friends the best in this time. And to introduce our speaker is Board Member Karen Rowley.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Press Club. Our speaker today is Dr. Monty Sullivan, who is president of the Louisiana Community and Technical College System. He was named to that position in February of 2014. He's the fourth person to serve as president. And before that, he was chancellor of Delgado Community College in New Orleans and executive vice president for LCTCS. And before he came to LCTCS, he was vice chancellor for academic services and research for the Virginia Community College System. He is married to Kelly Miles Sullivan, a registered nurse and a graduate of John Tyler Community College. They have 4 daughters and 4 grandsons. Please help me welcome Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you for that introduction, and I have to share some news with you, right? Appropriate to share news with the Press Club. Just learned this weekend that we will have grandbaby number 5. So pretty excited. So I have to add, I think, a little girl to that list soon. So we're excited. But great to be with you again. Always an honor to be at the Press Club, and it's been a few years. I think it's probably been 2-3 years since I had an opportunity to visit with you. But I want to go back in history a bit, and it's, I think, befitting that today is a day that we recognize and honor the service of Governor Romer to the state of Louisiana. And as we take that historical look back, it was during the Romer administration that we began to hear this rumbling about creation of a community and technical college system. I have in my office a report that was completed by Dr. James Collier, Jim Collier. I think most of you probably know Dr. Collier. That report was started as a result of Dr. Collier's time serving as chancellor at Delgado Community College. And it was Governor Buddy Romer who asked for that report that outlines how you create a community and technical college system. The most striking part of that report, from my perspective, is the fact that it didn't talk about institutions, it didn't talk about systems, it didn't talk about all of the things and the structures that you would imagine, but instead it focused in on how we serve the people of Louisiana. That was revolutionary at the time. How do we better serve the people of Louisiana? How do we prepare our citizens to take part in this economy? And so as we think about today, I want to take you then to the next historical marker, which 1998. It was in 1998 when then Senator Jay Darden carried a bill on behalf of the administration to create a community and technical college system in Louisiana. On October 8th, I believe it was, of 1998, that constitutional amendment was passed by the people. The people of Louisiana said, yes, we endorse this notion of a community and technical college system. Fast forward from 1998 to where we are today. 20 plus years. This community and technical college system has been in place. What I think is important to note today is that this creation of a system of colleges, a workforce engine for the state of Louisiana, is largely, I think, one of the biggest steps Louisiana has taken educationally, probably in the last 4 or 5 decades. Development of a community and technical college system. Let me tell you why I think that is the case. Not because I work in this role daily, or because I'm a community college fan, or even because my kids have graduated from community colleges. My wife has graduated from a community college, right? All of those are pieces and parts. But what is most, I think, important is to look at the number of people across the state of Louisiana being served, and number of people educated and skilled who are able to get up and go to work every day, earn an honest day's living, take care of their families. These are colleges that are of and for the people. You might even think of them as democracy's college. Our community and technical colleges are a source of economic mobility, social mobility, in nearly every aspect. If we are to educate and skill the people of Louisiana, yes, it will happen at our fine universities. But let me tell you, if we're going to educate and skill the masses, then we have a responsibility to make sure that that education is near the people. And so what you have in the 12 community and technical colleges here in Louisiana, we serve over 140, 150,000 students a year. We graduate nearly 34,000 this past year, students. Now, the word graduate, it's important to note, that might include someone who finishes an associate degree, let's just say a nurse as an example. But it may also include someone who earns a certification, say a commercial driver's license. We were just having a conversation earlier about the inability to find people who have those skill sets, who can go to work, earn a good living, ensure that our business community is able to be successful in Louisiana, but also take care of the individuals. That has been the mission and our work for the last 20 plus years. So as we reflect on the 20 years, there is a piece of the puzzle that has been missing. We know that Louisiana, in relative terms, is a relatively poor state. We also have, from an educational attainment point of view, some challenges. And then thirdly, there are huge equity gaps in the state of Louisiana that we must address. We can no longer afford to view the difference that exists between people in urban communities and those in rural communities, to view the difference between people of color and people of the majority. From an education perspective, if Louisiana is to rise, we must educate and skill all of our people. And that is the mission of community and technical colleges right here in Louisiana. You know, if you scroll back in time to about 1908, 1910, we created in this country compulsory education laws. Compulsory education meaning that it's necessary for the citizens of this country to be educated at the high school level. What has changed in the last 100 plus years? Almost everything. Almost everything has changed. And today, in order to function in this economy, particularly post-COVID economy, we know you've got to have skills and education beyond high school. And so the proposal that we have brought forward in this legislative session in the form of Senate Bill 148, sponsored by President Paige Cortez on the Senate side, sponsored by Speaker Clay Schexnayder on the House side, is a bill that provides that access for all of Louisiana. You know, in this state, we graduate about 40,000 kids from high school every year. But yet we have a pool of adults across the state, 1.1 million working age adults, just under half of our working age population that has a high school diploma or less. Now, I want you to pause for a second and think, what would it look like today if you had a high school diploma or less and you're searching for a job? Your options are slim. And the options you do have likely require you to have more than one job, typically 2 or 3, and no benefits. Think about the struggle that is occurring in homes everywhere across the state of Louisiana. Right here in Baton Rouge, certainly. But think about people in rural communities. What does it look like when you have a high school diploma only, you're searching for a job in rural Louisiana? That's a tough place to be. And so our work over the last 20 years has been about contributing to that. If you go back to 1999, the first year creation of this system, we had about 4,000 or 5,000 students that graduated every year. 20 years later, we're looking at 34,000 students graduating from these colleges. These are folks that are graduating in fields that allow them to go to work immediately, to earn a living. You know, we often say with our students that they are proud of the degree. They're proud of that sheepskin to hang on the wall. But it's the other piece of paper that so many of our students show up for. They're showing up because they need a paycheck. The reality of life has hit this group. Our students are average age 27. We have 18-year-old students that come to us right out of high school, but for the most part, our students are adults. These are folks that 10 years ago they finished high school. And what happened from the completion of high school till the time that we see them on our college campuses is 10 years of life. Debt, children, sometimes incarceration, health issues. Life comes at this group very quickly. And what that creates for us is a group of students that are highly motivated. When you talk to our faculty about teaching 27 to 30-year-olds, their response is, I love them. I love the stories. I love the motivation. You don't have to chase them down to look for an assignment. They show up, they sit on the front row, They do their work in advance because they're motivated. They understand life's requirements, which is that you be educated and skilled in order to be able to take care of yourself and your family. So this session, Senate Bill 148 has moved through the Senate without a single vote in opposition. This past week, we were in House Education. Again, no opposition to a bill that creates a funding mechanism for those adults. Focused again, a complement to our TOPS effort. You know, if you think of it, Louisiana's TOPS effort, $320 million on merit-based aid. Those are students who are doing well on the ACT, well in terms of their grade point average. They're taking a curriculum that is a rigorous curriculum. All of that is great. But what Louisiana has needed for years is a tool to serve that 1.1 million working age adults that so desperately need the education and skills to help them fully participate in this economy. That proposal is the MJ Mike Foster Promise Program. Mike Foster, in many ways, was the father of community and technical colleges in Louisiana. This is a gentleman that back in 2015 joined us for an annual conference. And I had a few brief moments before we went on stage just to ask him, as you look back on your accomplishments, what are some of the biggest things that you're most proud of? No question, it was community and technical colleges right off the top. And he began to talk about something that spurred a thought for me, and that was the political commercial that all of you will remember. One of the gentlemen stooped down welding. He turns, he raises the hood, and he says, "Hi, I'm Mike Foster. I'm running for governor." There was so much built into that commercial that wasn't just an introduction of Mike Foster, but it was an endorsement of skills, of working with your hands, of the importance of education, of a gentleman who understood the needs of the people of Louisiana. And so every day as we go to work, we think about and try to live up to that expectation of the role of community and technical colleges. This idea of a Foster Promise program is not one that's unique to Louisiana. Nationally, there are many states that have put in place promise programs. But I want to distinguish between what you read about and see in other states and what we are proposing and believe will be put in place very shortly. That is that the Foster Promise program is aimed at adults, first and foremost, trying to solve the problems of the state of Louisiana. You all cover every year what goes on down at the Capitol. And I would bet that each one of you in every session has covered the budget circumstance of the state of Louisiana. And with a couple of exceptions, it's negative. It is we have more expense than we have revenue. Oftentimes when we have the opportunity to present at the legislature at the table, we have a conversation about how we educate and skill more people, putting more people to work, more people educated, more people skilled, more people working, and more people paying taxes. That's what will help lift Louisiana. That's exactly what the MJ Mike Foster Promise program will do for the state. One additional difference between our Promise program proposed and those of other states, there is no merit-based portion. No ACT requirement, no grade point average requirement. If you don't have a high school diploma, we're saying to you, you must co-enroll in a program to help you earn that equivalency along with the skills. But let me be real clear. Some folks hear that and they think, wait a minute, you can't go to college if you don't have a high school diploma, right? That's not true. In fact, what we find is the students without a high school diploma are oftentimes more motivated than any other student on our college campus. They didn't drop out of high school because they couldn't deal with fractions and decimals. They maybe had some trouble with comma usage, but that wasn't the reason they dropped out. They dropped out of high school for personal and social and economic reasons. We have to find a way to recapture that group because you and I cannot see Louisiana excel unless everyone is a part of that. From an equity perspective, we will continue to focus on only those education fields that are highest demand, 5 career paths. You can't show up at one of our colleges and earn the Promise program and enroll in just any old program. 5 career paths: healthcare, IT, construction, maritime transportation, and manufacturing. Those are the 5 career sectors in Louisiana that are in demand. Those are ones that we can assure a student, complete this program, complete this certification, and you have a life for yourself. The MJ Mike Foster Promise Program is one that will also incorporate not only those degree programs, as we see in many states, but also the short-term certifications. Here in Louisiana, we have a thriving maritime and logistics-related industry sector. It is one of the biggest parts of Louisiana's economy. But as you look across the jobs that are available in that field, you really only find degrees required at the top end. You still have deckhands. You still have folks all the way up the rank in the maritime space that are all what we think of in post-secondary education as workforce and not for credit. Those positions they may not be credit in a college setting, but let me tell you, they're critically important to the future of Louisiana. They're critically important to the economy that is the maritime industry. And guess what else? They pay darn well. Those are positions where people can earn that certification, go to work, and be able to sustain a family. We believe that the MJ Mike Foster Promise Program is custom made for the state of Louisiana. This is an effort that is being done on behalf of the working adults all across the state who need a hand up, an opportunity to be educated and skilled at one of our community and technical colleges. And by the way, this isn't just the LCTCS. This is an initiative that is coming with the full endorsement and support of our governor, the endorsement and support of both chambers of the legislature, endorsement and support of the Commissioner of Higher Education, who put forward a bold master plan for education that requires that we do things differently. And it also comes with the involvement of 2 of our partners, 2-year colleges in the Southern system and the LSU system, LSU Eunice, Southern University Shreveport. It is truly a comprehensive effort for public 2-year colleges to engage, educate, and skill the people of the state. We could not be more excited about the proposal. I save for the last what I believe is perhaps the most important, and that is the engagement of the business community, the engagement of our economic development partners. This proposal was not put together by a group of educators sitting in a room. This is a proposal that was put together with business partners, with economic development partners, to ensure that the training was the right training, that it was available to people in places where that training was needed, and that there were jobs at the back end. That's the key. Education for far too long has thought of itself as a manufacturing entity that produces graduates and hopes industry will somehow connect with them and hire them. Instead, what we're looking to do is to make sure that these students, while enrolled, are able to take on internships with businesses. They're able to do the hands-on work that goes with those credentials to make sure that they have an immediate contact with an employer. This is a very personal piece for me. It is personal in many regards. My father quit school in the 6th grade. He tells the story that he went to the University of Epps. For those of you who know where Epps, Louisiana is, he believes the University of Epps is where he got all the education he needed. Over the years, he earned certifications in fields that allowed him to travel the world and make a great living. And it was that example that helped me to understand companies are hiring skills. And while the headline in some of these newspapers may read unemployment at record levels, yes, unemployment is high. But let me tell you what is also happening in Louisiana's economy. There are jobs available. The challenge, you have to have skills to qualify. So our responsibility, particularly in a post-COVID economy, is to make sure that we're connecting that 1.1 million working-age adults to the jobs available in this economy. Glad to answer any questions that you may have. We're excited about the work ahead and certainly look forward to working with you as we try to push out the message to make sure the people of Louisiana know about the MJ Mike Foster Promise Program. This system, in the next 20 years, can you imagine what this system will look like in 20 years? These colleges and the impact that they have on individual communities has been huge over the last 20 years. but just wait and see. Wait to see what these colleges will do on behalf of the people of Louisiana. These colleges, they aren't simply institutions with classrooms and buildings. They are the places where communities are transformed. How many of you have traveled through the little town of Winsboro over the last few years? Just north of Winsboro, you'll notice that there's a campus to the right. That campus was located just 7 years ago in downtown Winsboro in a building that was not up to code, that we couldn't even find an electrician to work on that facility. That's how bad it was. And because of the great work of the legislature, we were able to bring forward a facility that now sits right there prominent on the outskirts of the town of Winsboro. Back in the day when that campus was downtown, we had less than 50 students enrolled. Today, the campus dean is absolutely rocking it. This semester, over 600 students enrolled in that campus in the little town of Winsboro, teaching programs from practical nursing to welding to carpentry to a newly created ag tech program at that campus that I think has huge potential for growth. That is the story of community and technical colleges, but it's not about us. It's about what happens to those graduates when they complete at the colleges. There's plenty of data out there to show from our own work over the last 4 to 5 years of the graduates and the income that they earn afterwards. What we know is that our students, when they complete those short-term credentials, earn 19% more than they were earning previously. We're talking about investments of 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks of time. Think about that for a second. For these adults, time is the enemy. Time is the enemy. The mortgage payment, tires on the car, time is the enemy. Do I have time for another job? Or can I go to school for 8 or 10 or 12 weeks? That's the question that so many adults across Louisiana are having to pose. We believe this is an effort that is going to help to lift all of the state of Louisiana. Thank you very much, and I'm, again, glad to answer any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
You talked about the history of the community college system. 1991 was the year that Jay Martin introduced the bill. There were, I thought, community colleges or technical schools before that. What was the system then?
So there was no system at the time. So there was a collection of what we referred to then as Louisiana technical colleges with 50-plus campuses around the state of Louisiana. We had institutions like Delgado, Nunez, Bossier Parish Community College. They were all situated as members of the University of Louisiana system at the time. And so when you're a part of a group of institutions that have a 4-year mission, it's kind of difficult to be able to focus on the 2-year college mission. Those are two very different things. We have to help people in Louisiana to understand the difference between research universities and 2-year colleges. We are complementary to one another. We are not competition by any stretch. And so there was not what Governor Foster referred to as a comprehensive workforce engine in the state of Louisiana. It was great that we had Delgado in New Orleans. And over the years, if you look at the population in New Orleans, how many people have attended and completed at Delgado Community College? You can hardly find a nurse in a hospital in New Orleans that wasn't educated at Delgado. So those were great institutions and glad we had them, but what happens if you live in Winfield? What happens if you live in small towns all over North Louisiana, Manny, Columbia, go down the list? What happens? You can't afford to stop life and move to Baton Rouge or move to New Orleans. And remember, a good chunk of our population lives north of I-10. Sometimes we forget that here in Baton Rouge, right? We have to make sure that there is that comprehensive notion so that people, regardless of their geography, have access to programs that will allow them to engage in the economy. Yes, sir. I think I saw a hand over here. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if I missed it, but did you mention what specific fields it will be helping?
So, right, the five career pathways include healthcare, IT. So those are industry sectors, so they're broader. So if you want to, perhaps in the healthcare field, something along the lines of an EMT program or nursing, a whole range of different possibilities in healthcare. IT, it might be cybersecurity. Perhaps you're looking at an opportunity to go to work down at IBM, which has done a really fine job of onboarding many of our students from Baton Rouge Community College who are working there today and are some of the best employees at that facility. In fact, one of our former students, a graduate at Baton Rouge Community College and student board member, was Employee of the Year with a 2-year degree, right? The reason is because the skills that she earned at Baton Rouge Community College were aligned with what IBM said this is what we need in our next employee. Beyond that, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, as well as, I'm missing one now. I'll think of it. Sorry. I'm sorry?
Construction.
Construction. Thank you, sir. How could I forget that, right? Yes, ma'am.
How is this program funded?
So the program is being authorized in the current legislative session. It will start July 1 of 22, so it's a year out. It will take some time for us to get the program launched, to structure it. It will be administered by LOSFA, who's the entity that administers TOPS. But the reality is we didn't want to run out on July 1 of 21 and begin telling people about a program and have the uptake be slow. Instead, we wanted to be very deliberate about how we build out the effort and how we tell the story. So many of you will have an opportunity to work with us as we get out into small communities all over Louisiana and tell the story of the NJ Mike Foster Promise Program. To directly answer your question, the program will be funded by state funds, by the state of Louisiana. But here's what's important about that, I believe. If you look at one of the major planks of the Biden administration's education platform is the creation of what they refer to as the America's College Promise. The America's College Promise, as currently proposed, would take dollars from the state and match that with dollars from the federal government. So $1 from a state matched with $3 from the federal government will provide you with a pool of funds that if we put up $10 million, we're looking at a $40 million fund. We can have real impact with those kinds of numbers. So that's where we're headed, and we're hopeful that we're able to put those together side by side. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm curious, I don't know this. You familiar with the 529 START program?
Yes, sir.
And if so, can that money be used to go into the programs that you're talking about?
The 529 plans can be used to fund those kinds of initiatives and or those kinds of programs, but I want you to look back in time and look at the 529 development of the 529 programs. For the most part, we are just seeing the last 3 to 4 high school graduating classes that have those 529 plans behind them. The population we're dealing with, they didn't know what 529 was at the time. What they're hopeful of is that they can earn enough now that they can create a 529 program for their children. And so, I'm sorry?
The current 529 says if I have 529
Mm-hmm.
for my grade.
Yes.
I anticipate that they'd be going to college, and so far they have. But
Right.
if any of them wanted to go to one of these technical colleges, would I be able to use that?
You can. You absolutely can. And the other thing that I would share with you there is we have to do a better job as educators and in this business to help students to understand how you streamline all of those resources to make sure that funding is not the barrier, right? Because believe me, this population has plenty of barriers, from transportation to childcare to jobs to you name it. They need as much support as they can possibly get. Other questions or comments? Yes?
How are you going to get the word out to this group if they're not really
Great.
tuned into college right now?
Mhm, mhm.
How do they find
Let me tell you what we will not do. We're not going down to the local high school and telling the graduating class.
Yeah.
It's important that they know, right? But the group we really are going after is the adult market. Many of you saw back during the fall with both Saints games as well as with the LSU football games, you saw commercials for something called Reboot Louisiana, Reboot Your Career, right? Reboot Your Career was put together in terms of a PR component by Mr. Quentin Taylor, who's with us today in the blue jacket, and then Ms. Camille Conaway, who many of you know from her work in the past with the lobby as well as the general administration, has been an incredible leader, helping us to produce. We are on pace now to produce 5,000 graduates in 1 year under the Reboot Your Career initiative. These are all short-term certifications, allowing people to get in, get out, and go to work. So it's really, in many ways, it's a beta test for the Promise Initiative. So how do we get the word out? In every venue we can find. I'll share a quick story with you. Quentin may have a little sheepish grin on this one, but Quentin Taylor put together an initiative 3 years ago that included going to churches on Sunday morning and telling the story. Now, here's what we learned. The prospective students aren't in the congregation, but I know who is. Their mom, their grandparent, their aunt, uncle, right? The pastor, people that are respected in their communities can help deliver that message. But it's the other part of that PR campaign that I think is a little non-traditional. We were able to become connected with some of the clubs that do club promotions right here in Baton Rouge. We're going to have a get-together Friday night, an email string or a text string. Quentin was able to connect with those folks and tell the story directly to that population, because here's what you know. If they're not already enrolled at one of our fine universities here in the Baton Rouge area, the likelihood is they need to be enrolled with us. And so what it requires of us is to go exactly where they are. We're also working directly with many employers, because what we also know is many of the employers, they have people who work for them who, if they had one certification, they could step up, one step higher. I'll use the healthcare example. Someone who serves as a CNA is typically going to make somewhere in the $14 an hour range. But with one additional add-on certification, the MedPass certification, which allows that CNA to pass routine medications to patients, you're talking an extra $2 an hour, $2 to $2.50. That person just went from 14 to 16 bucks an hour. How does that change the life of a 27-year-old single mother with a couple of kids at home? It's the difference between reliable transportation, reliable child care. That's the difference that it makes for this population. So it will take a very non-traditional approach in terms of being able to get the word out. But it is one that we've done a lot of work in this space, and we continue to push the envelope. I want to give a shout out to the folks at Baton Rouge Area Foundation who have partnered with us throughout this work and continue to work with us specifically on the messaging. Great group of folks there. John Davies and his team have just been incredible. So we look forward to rolling out that PR campaign at the appropriate time. Yes, sir.
What would the application process be like?
Great question. So we just finished up a meeting before we left the office about that very point. One of the challenges that we have in education generally, have you heard of something called the FAFSA? The Federal Financial Aid Application? It is a bear, okay? This thing is 180 some questions. It asks you all kinds of things that I'm telling you, if I handed it to this group, you would have to call a CPA to answer the questions that are on this form. And so our goal is to minimize that red tape on the front end, because trust me, this group of students or prospective students, there's a reason they didn't succeed in education, because we didn't make it easy. We want to make sure that the hard work is done in the classroom or in the labs or in the field, not to get into college. So that process will be one that we streamline. We're looking forward to, and would solicit even your help in identifying what are some of the hurdles that you had along the way that might be helpful to us, for us to remove. You may be familiar that back in December, as a part of the second stimulus package, Congress approved a measure within the stimulus that will simplify the FAFSA. It will take that form from 180 questions down to 40 or 50. We're excited about that. We think that's going to help Louisiana citizens be able to access federal aid. Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned $10 million. Is that kind of the working number
Right.
you're starting with?
That is the working number. And in fact, we felt it was important, because of the feedback we've heard from legislators, we felt it was important to put a cap on this effort. And so that cap is right now at $10.5 million. You might ask why. Well, it's real simple. When we approved TOPS, I guarantee you no one thought it'd be a $320 million program come 2021. We wanted to make clear to legislators that we believe there should be a cap, but there's got to be enough of a resource to demonstrate an impact across the state. And so that $10.5 million is the number. I would also tell you that each year we are required to set forth a report back to the legislature that outlines graduates, if they went to work, earnings, tax collections. Those are the kinds of things that education expenditures are a positive thing. I think we all believe that innately, that more education is good. But have we ever paused to ask the question, what do we get back from it? And that's what legislators are asking us to do. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Curiosity, your program is very targeted, 2 years, get a job. if for some reason something changed and the student either needed to or wanted to extend past 2 years, is it still seamless transfer of credits to?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's one of the things that has changed in the last 20 years about education is most students who participate in post-secondary education, they are not linear in terms of how they attend college. When I attended Louisiana Tech, I had a one-shot deal, 4 years, and then I had to figure out whether I was going to go to work or go to grad school, right? The average student who attends post-secondary education these days goes to school in iterative form. They go and they pick up a certification. And I use the example of the student from the Winfield campus that was featured in a Boston Globe story this past year. This young lady finished, her first certification was non-credit, which helped her to get a job. She stayed on because her company provided the tuition benefit. She's just graduated this past Saturday with an associate degree as a forestry technician, making great money. That's the story that is oftentimes playing out on our college campuses. And so being able to help that person then move from that initial certification to an associate degree, now the question becomes, in consultation with their supervisor and the folks in the company, is the baccalaureate degree next? That's more of what we have to begin to focus on as a state, because it is about how we provide those pathways to help people get to management along the way. Yes?
You have a very balanced racial diversity of race there.
Mhm.
There are a lot of issues between blacks and whites and other cultures. How successful are you in keeping a good morale and,
Yeah.
and not having to deal with a lot of
Mhm.
racial issues?
You know, I'll start with the equity data in Louisiana is abysmal. We have about 32% of our white population who holds an associate degree or higher. A full 10 percentage points below that are the African American populations. Louisiana cannot advance unless we lift all of Louisiana. And your community and technical colleges enroll more and graduate more minorities than the rest of higher education combined. Let that sink in for a second. If we're going to lift Louisiana, yes, it's going to happen on the campuses of our HBCUs. I started my career at Grambling State University. Love that place. The place where everybody is somebody. We live by that even to this day in our own institutions. But I can tell you, HBCUs are part of the solution, right alongside community and technical colleges. Yes, the last couple of years have been difficult from a social justice point of view. But let me tell you, nobody is leading in the way that Quentin Taylor and his team are around the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. We're drilling down and looking at data to ask some really hard questions. You know, many of our programs are selective. Registered nursing program as an example, process technology program. All of those have big numbers on the back end of them in terms of salary. But are they available to everyone? Tough question. We want to drill down and understand how many people chose that major and what was the makeup, how many people enrolled in those classes and what was the makeup, how many people actually got in, what was the makeup of that group, and how many graduated. Let me tell you why we're asking these questions. Yes, there's a social responsibility part of it, and that's a big part of the answer. But we're also asking that question because when I sit with a guy like Warner Thomas at Ochsner, and he says, how can you help me diversify my workforce? He gets it. He understands this is how we're going to be more successful as a company. This is how we're going to provide better care to our patients. So we have a responsibility to lift all people. And I think we have done a great job of that over the last 20 years. But there's a lot of work left to be done right here in Louisiana. And what I find on our college campuses is our faculty and staff are not focused on the finger pointing exercise that goes back and forth, regardless of what the issue may be. Instead, they're focused on doing things about it. Putting out a statement is great, but a statement doesn't change a thing. It's how do we change the culture of our organization to make sure that we're embracing all people. Yes, sir.
Baton Rouge Community College was growing by leaps and bounds, and then the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still on a major growth curve? And how are you at the Baton Rouge Community College? How are they coping with all the students as far as space and so forth?
Yeah. So Baton Rouge Community College was at one point one of the top 10 fastest growing in community and technical colleges across the country. And in fact, if you look at our 12 colleges, about 8 of them are in that top 10 list historically. What has happened in the last 7 or 8 years particularly has been a shift by students. Students are voting with their feet because what they've said is, we don't care for your 16-week semester. We don't necessarily need an associate degree to get that job, and in fact, I don't have the time to commit to it. And so students have begun to vote by going into what we refer to as workforce non-credit training programs to get that certification. If it's in the construction industry, it's an NCCER certification, or the maritime industry, as I mentioned. And so enrollment is different today than it was 7 or 8 years ago. But the credentials earned in those workforce non-credit areas are at least as valuable as the academic credentials. Those folks who earn short-term certifications, they out-earn our associate degree graduates every single year in the data. Why is that? Because the short-term training programs are targeted at specific needs that we know just down the street there's an employer that's going to hire someone with this skill set. So it's closer to the market. So in terms of overall enrollment, Baton Rouge Community College has seen a dip in their credit enrollment, but overall in the workforce training space, they're at a place today where they're serving somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 students in a year's time. That includes credit enrollments, that includes workforce non-credit, but it also includes that adult basic education group that's out there. Without a high school diploma, you got to wonder how anyone makes it in this space. I think that was my cue that it's all close to 1 o'clock, right?
One more question. I think that's it then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ron Fauché.